Alright guys, welcome back to Storytime Mania World 4's channel with your host, Xandra Tisano, and today we are going to be learning about British versus American English. This is Food Translate. Well, British people don't call a lot of foods Americans call them. There are different types, like Americans say pickles, but British people call them gherkins, and like Americans say ham, but British people say gammon, and etc. Let's jump right into it. The first one here is a little thin slice of a potato that Americans call, or a spud that British people call, and British people call these crisps, while Americans say chips. Well, it does look like a crisp, but we're going to be shocking when we look at the next one. These deep-fried potato or spud things look very good for eating, because in the British, these people call these chips, and Americans would say French fries. Like, they do look strips for good eating, so Americans and British say chips for different things, while Australian use chips for both anyway. Alright, we are moving on to something more healthy. Here we call this long green vegetable zucchini or courgette. Well, courgette is UK and zucchini is US. But there's not just only one vegetable that has a different name. Here we have the aubergine or eggplant. Well, British people call this an aubergine, which looks like a funky Z sound. But Americans call this an eggplant because the plant does look like an egg a little bit. But here's another one that is a different vegetable name. Here we call this long yellow vegetable from the field. From the UK, they say maize. Americans call these corn. Well, all three of the last vegetable names, like courgette, aubergine, and maize, are all French words. I don't know why British people call these French words, but in the UK, this is a maize. Here we have this little delight dessert called a biscuit in the UK, but however in America it's called cookies, like the chocolate chip thing. British people like to have tea with their biscuits, but Americans like to dip their cookies in milk. We are going to be shocking when we look at this one and the next one. Scone is what they call in the UK, like this big bread that looks very delicious that you like to eat with breakfast. But in the USA, they call it a biscuit. Very good noun for a classic breakfast. In the UK, British people like to have jam and cream on their scones, while in America, they like to have gravy on their biscuits. Sometimes, Americans like to have jam and cream on their scones. I'm sorry that I messed it up in the last column. I said scone instead of biscuit, but Americans call these a scone. And in the UK, people call this a rock cake. Well, it does look a little rocky to us, but in the Americans, they say scone. Alright, number 9. We call these little delightful little desserts a cupcake. However, in the UK, this is called a fairy cake. Well, it does look like a cup and a fairy cake to me, because it has flowers and it has a little spike on top. Very odd. This is our last one. Jam or jelly? British people call this little mussed-up fruit thing jam, while the other people say jelly. Because you can see there is jam or jelly on the vanilla bean scone or vanilla bean rock cake, as they call it in the UK. It does look interesting to eat, but I know there is some things to do with it. So now that British people know their American English and American people know their British English, a lot of foods have different names in the UK and the US. And I hope you liked the video. And don't forget to subscribe.